All right, so welcome to Pop In PD. Today we're going to be talking about a great tool created by Lucid called Visual Activities. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a link to this presentation so that you can access it in your Meet. So I'm just going to really quickly share the link to the presentation, and you guys can follow along as I present these different things about visual activities. So the first thing I want to point out is how to create a visual activity. And whether you are in Lucid Chart or Lucid Spark, you can tell it's Lucid Spark because it has a symbol like this. Lucid Chart has brackets that look like for code. But regardless of where you are, if you look for the rocket ship, that's how you launch visual activities. So if I click on it, I have a whole bunch of different activities to choose from. I can use a vertical access board. I can use a double access board. They call this quad sorting. So there are a whole bunch of different types of activities that I can load for my students. So the way that visual activities work is when you create the activity, it creates, for each individual student, they have an experience where they're dragging things, dragging manipulatives. Each student has their own screen with their own activity that they participate in. So I'm going to open this one and I'll show you what it looks like. So when you create the activity, students are able to open it. The students would be able to drag responses, and their responses will be up here. So you can see them kind of going into where they are set up in the table here, but they drag them to where they think the appropriate response would be. So they just drag them down. And when they're done, they submit their response. And what's really neat about visual activities is that every student has their own response. So if I click on submit, I can view the results and I can see how each student has responded to the visual activity. I can also look at the objects and see how the students, what they selected and whether there's agreement or disagreement. And this is a great way to formatively assess students and to lead a conversation about what students are learning. So visual activities are really good. We have a number of different activities. So I'm just kind of demonstrating really quickly. This can be used for science. So this is going to be one that shows a cell. And once again, I've dragged these in already, but if you're playing along in the presentation, you should be able to see it yourself and like your own version. And we'll share a link of this with you as well. But what the students will be able to do is they'll be able to drag their responses to each choice that they feel like is the appropriate choice that matches. Now, I don't know that I'm necessarily putting these in the correct place. I'm just dragging them. But you can see that they have the ability to drag their responses and figure out what each part or organelle in the cell is. The other thing that is kind of important to consider when you're setting this up is that you make sure that you label everything. So I'm going to really quickly just break out of this and set up a visual activity using the quad category activity, which is what I use to do that activity there. So I'm just going to add this to the board. And if I click in, I can click and I can drag these. So I can choose to have 2, 3, or I can choose to have multiple. So if I just hit Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC and drag, I can drag out as many of these as I want. And I can give the categories a name. Now, it's really important if you're doing the quad sorting activity that you do give everything a name so that you can see, so that when you're looking at their responses, you have something that you're comparing their responses to. So I'm just going to go back to that cell one, which I think is here. So notice that if I click on objects, I have the numbers 8, like I have them all numbered. So I know based on the number, I can have an answer key that tells me which organelle it's supposed to be, but I have to have some way of identifying where those things are going. So if I were setting up a visual activity where I was teaching maybe uh, literary devices, I could have, let's see, so I could have metaphor, simile, and so on as I create the activity. When I'm done creating the activity, what I do is I click on Save Changes. And if I want my students to access it, I click on Share. And what that did is it creates a link for the activity that I can share with any students. And that link I can share with my students. And like I said, when it launches the activity, each student has their own activity where they're sorting, and it's really easy to compare their results. So this presentation has visual activities just to demonstrate. It has visual activities for math. So this is a clothesline sorting activity where they're learning about exponents. It has visual activities for history. So this is a constitution activity where they're dragging the kind of powers of the different branches of government into their appropriate place. So there are lots of different ways that you can set up and vary and change the visual activities. And I've created some additional ones just to show you kind of what else you can do. So this is one that shows rules of photography. So you can kind of drag those to where you kind of feel like they belong. This one was for just, I think this one related to digital citizenship and kind of polling students about what they feel like is the appropriate time for them to get on social media. So there are lots of different ways that you can set up visual activities. So that's basically kind of what I wanted to show with visual activities.